नमस्कार डॉक्टर माथुर साहब।
नमस्कार सर।
नमस्कार नमस्कार। Sir, with your permission, can we start?
Yes, sir. I was waiting for that only. Yes.
I was waiting for 11 o'clock. So welcome back, friends. Good morning to all of you. As you know, today we have a very important lecture by the authority, I can say the authority in the world and a unique authority in the country for the biodiversity related regulations. The lecture is by Dr. Vinod B. Mathur, the chairperson of the National Biodiversity Authority, which is a statutory body under the Government of India, Ministry of Environment and Forest. Friends, as you know, it's a very important lecture series. And under this lecture series, which is being organized for a very noble cause, and that is a proud moment for every Indian, and that is to celebrate the 75 years of our glory, our glorious achievements, I can say, of India's independence. And for that, as I have already told many times, the ICAR has taken up many activities, and one of these activities being the 75 lectures by eminent persons, like the one we will have today. For the sake of reminding all of you, I can just say that in the past, most of you have attended the lectures. They have been by the experts in different fields, including the agricultural research, agriculture policy, the health related issues, COVID issues, yoga, the motivational lectures, and many more. So in the same series, this lecture is also very important for today's talk. And just to remind you the brief achievements, Dr. Mathur is a well-known person, doesn't require much introduction, but let me just briefly tell or briefly introduce Dr. Mathur for the benefit of our all august audience, which include our vice chancellors, the previous authorities. We see Dr. R.B. Singh, we see Dr. Gautam, we see many directors, vice chancellors who are attending these lectures. So friends, I can just briefly introduce Dr. Mathur. Dr. Mathur, as you know, he obtained his doctorate degree from the University of Oxford, United Kingdom during 1991. After serving for 33 years at the prestigious Wildlife Institute of India, including as the Dean from 2005 to 2014, and subsequently as the Director of from 2014 to 2019, Dr. Mathur was appointed as the 11th Chairperson of the National Biodiversity Authority on 1st September 2019. The NBA, as you all know, is a statutory body of the Government of India for providing advisory and regulatory services on all matters related to the biodiversity conservation and management. Dr. Mathur is the Regional Vice Chair presently of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas and member of the International Association of Impact Assessment. Dr. Mathur has now spent over 3 decades in actively contributing to a wide range of training, research, and academic programs in the field of biodiversity conservation. He has extensive experience as an international trainer, and his special interests include natural resource conservation, heritage conservation, environmental and strategic impact assessment, and biodiversity informatics. Dr. Mathur has been actively contributing on research policy interface issues and has been the Regional Vice Chair, Asia Pacific region of United Nations Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, multidisciplinary expert panel. He is currently the UN IPBES Bureau member from 2019 to 2022, and also the UN CBD Bureau member. He is the co-chair of IPBES Task Force on Policy, Support Tools and Methodologies, and member of the IPBES Task Force on Capacity Building He has been the chair of the UN CBD Informal Advisory Group for developing synergies between 7 biodiversity-related conventions, and he has been part of the official Indian delegation for CBD and UNESCO World Heritage Committee meetings since 2006, a very long period, and has in-depth knowledge about the working of these conventions. He possesses an outstanding scholastic record coupled with strong leadership skills and networking capabilities. He has made significant contributions as a scientific administrator and in promoting scientific research inter alia through both publications and outreach programs in the field of biodiversity conservation. What a illustrious biodata, the contributions, achievement, and we are really delighted to listen to Dr. Mathur and our eminent audience also, I can say, Dr. P.L. Gautam, who has been earlier the chairman of National Biodiversity Authority. He is also present, and I will request him to kindly chair this today's session. Professor R.B. Singh, who has been at various key positions, Director IRI, Chairman ASRB, and international organizations. He is also one of the audience in today's session. And I see many other eminent persons. So I hope, Dr. Mathur, we all will be greatly benefited by this. And I again thank you very much for kindly accepting our invitation for this important. We are having 75 lectures, and floor is yours. You can take time, and then maybe 10 minutes we'll spend for responding to the questions by the audience. Thank you, Dr. Mathur.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Can you see my slides as well?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well.
Okay. So a very good morning to all my esteemed colleagues. It is very daunting to speak before such a illustrious audience, Dr. Gautam and all top scientists of the country. I would definitely try my best to present what I call as issues with biodiversity governance and what is the global perspective and what is the national perspective for us. Now, this simple slide, which is before you, is just a person holding some soil. But there is a very important message there. As you can see in the text, nature underpins and sustains human quality of life. See, we may belong to different sectors, forestry, agriculture, biodiversity, infrastructure, whatever, but nature is the same. And this soil, as you can see, there is some plant material, there is an earthworm, and there is a host of microorganisms in the soil. It will not be out of place for me to say the entire agriculture productivity, the entire horticulture productivity, the entire food productivity, and the entire forest productivity is dependent on soil. But we know that how much care we take for the soil. The point of presenting this slide is to begin with to say that biodiversity is all encompassing. It is not just plant, it is not just animal, it is not just microorganism, it is not just people. It is a combination of all, and we need to see what we are doing to it. The variability and variety, as we see, is well known, but this is the important point, that nature's contribution to people are deteriorating. As you can see on the hand, the skin of the hand, you can see it has all the marks, all linings on that, to indicate that all is not well. Now, this is an interesting graphic. You can see it sums up a 50-year-old history from 1970 to 2022. On your left are contributions from nature, what we call now as nature's contribution to people, 18 of them. And on your right are the trends. And these are global trends from all the regions in the world, from Africa to Latin America to Asia. And everywhere we see the arrow is pointing downwards or southwards, meaning thereby that there is a decline. Whether we are talking in terms of freshwater quality, whether we are talking of regeneration of soil. So this is a very worrying picture, which scientists in the world And I'm sure you are aware the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IBIS, which is the technical arm right now, has presented in its report that this is what are the global trends. So what is the bottom line? The fabric of life on Earth is deteriorating. See, our children, our fashionable children, they wear torn jeans and torn clothes as a mark of fashion. But life is not fashion. As you can see, the threads which you can see, you recall our mothers and sisters, they use a stitch and a thread to put together anything which gets torn. And same example is with earth, the fabric of life is breaking. It is anybody's guess how long these threads will hold the fabric. Maybe a few years, a few months, but this is the picture which is emerging. Same thing is this fabric is getting smaller. It is getting frayed. And in scientific terms, all indicators of the global state of nature are decreasing. So this is, I'm afraid, a very worrying picture before us. And this picture is a global picture. It is not for India, not for Asia, not for Africa, but for all regions in the world. We are not doing what is required to be done for nature. So what are we doing? We are doing everything which is not to be done for biosphere. 75% of the land area is altered, 66% of the ocean area is altered, and a whopping 85% of wetlands have been lost. You can well imagine if freshwater wetlands are lost, what is going to be the impact. Let me now come back to species and species extinction. On your left, you see that these are the different taxonomic group where species are threatened with extinction. I want to draw your attention to the lines colored in yellow, in orange and red. Red is critically endangered, orange is endangered, and yellow is vulnerable. So this is what is a broad picture that we get. Different taxonomic groups are affected differently, but I'm afraid all of them are affected. And see what this little tiny frog is saying, that global extinction rates are now tens and hundreds of times higher than what they have been. And we are now talking of not 1, 2, but 10 million years. It's a whole time scale that we are talking that these extinction rates are going up. Let us see where these rates are going up. This is the graphic. So see, cumulative percentage of species that have become extinct. And you can see top of the line are amphibians, followed by mammals, followed by birds, followed by reptiles and fishes. And see the bottom line as well. All these years between 1500 and 1900, the rates of extinctions were less. But see what happens after 1900. These rates are shooting up. And that is what we need to be worried. As scientists, as resource managers, as policymakers, and administrators, that we need to do something. Of course, we cannot stop extinction, but definitely we can look at the anthropogenic rate of extinctions that you and I are contributing. The importance of local varieties. I'm sure as agriculture scientists, very eminent, you have dealt all through your life. We know what is the local variety, what is the local breed, and how important they are. Whether it is corn or whether it is cattle, these breeds are now disappearing. And today in this era of climate change, what is going to get affected are these local breeds, because they have been locally adapted. If the local temperature changes, if the local moisture changes, if the local soil condition changes, local rainfall changes, then these species and varieties are going to get affected. So I'm sorry that I'm presenting a very, very difficult and dismal picture, but that is also a reality. It is a wake-up call for us that we need to take and review our actions. So even sounding a little dramatic, I am saying that our planet is collapsing. And we know what collapse means. Extinction rates are high, populations of major species are declining. And this IBIS assessment that I talked about, it is saying that up to 1 million species of both plant and animal are going to get affected if we continue the business as usual. So what have we failed? We have failed to address the critical challenges. You remember for the last 20, 25, 30 years, we have been talking that we must not break the ceiling of 1.5 degrees C and the global warming effects are going to come. But there are already now signs. Look at the recent IPCC report that there are all indications that there is going to be a rise or break of this barrier of 1.5 degree. We are already into the 6 mass extinction, and there is a 60% decline or over 60% decline in the vertebrate populations in the world. So this is all a very worrisome picture. And we know that poverty, much of us living in the developing world understand what poverty is and what and how poverty is linked to both nature and climate. And if the natural processes change, if the climate changes, then we are going to get more and more into poverty and poverty-like situations over there. So let us look at the economic development, the models of economic development. Every country wants to develop, including ours. We are talking of 1, 2, 3, 4 trillion economy. But if that economic development takes place at the cost of ecology or environment, it is well clear that it is not going to augur well for all of us. So it is time that we need to look at the economic model. We need to see that if this economic model is destroying our planet, then we need to revise it, we need to review it, we need to look at alternatives over there. Very interestingly, many of you know that every year in early January, the top leaders in the business world descends on a place called Davos in Switzerland. And these business magnates discuss that what are the risks to their business. Obviously, as a business, I would be concerned to look at my fate of my business. And for the first time in 2020, just 2 years back, the World Economic Forum accepted that there is going to be a financial risk to global economy if nature is lost. It was the first time admission that nature's loss is going to affect the economy, it is going to affect the politics, it is going to affect everything. So this is, I would say, a very important milestone in the way in which businesses operate, because they are dependent on nature, they are dependent on biological diversity, and if the biological diversity is not maintained or not managed, then we run into difficulties over there. So we know that these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We have done a lot of mapping. Individually, we look at these goals and we say, okay, we want to reduce poverty, we want to have green cities, we want to have an urban wealth and so on. But this study is showing that as many as 10 Sustainable Development Goals out of 17 are dependent on nature. If we do not take care of nature, then it will be almost impossible to meet these goals of sustainability. You are all esteemed agriculture scientists involved in supporting and promoting food production. But the evidence is now coming up that the kind of agriculture that we do, the kind of unsustainable practices that we follow, I'm not saying all, but some of them, they can have a negative impact on the environment, on the nature, on the soil. And these are figures which are saying that we need to look at one more time the developments in agriculture, how we can make those changes. Already people are talking about eco-generative agriculture. We need to be more sensitive towards the development. Agriculture will remain the mainstay of our economy, but we need to give a place for meeting the biodiversity concerns as well. So these are something which we need to look at it and be very careful on that. Oh, my slide is getting stuck. Oops. Okay. Okay. So now this is something very important. I talked about loss of wetlands. Nature's loss, it affects both water quality and quantity. And we are concerned with both. We want wells not to dry up, our streams not to dry up, our rivers not to dry up. We are also concerned that they don't get polluted. So we need to take steps to ensure that water quality and quantity is not affected. And that is where we need to review our practices, whether they are in forestry, whether they are in agriculture, or whether they are in biodiversity. Now, this is something I want to spend a minute or two. We have all seen the last 3 years in the pandemic. Now that there are signs of pandemic receding, but let us see what caused this pandemic. It is true that the 2019 pandemic, we were all taken by surprise. But what is the learning from that? What is that the world needs to take call? We now understand that there are diseases which are called zoonotic, which are spread from animal to animal first and then from animal to human. And there is a possibility that more and more such zoonotic diseases will emerge in the coming years. If look on the right, what we are doing, we are cutting our forests, we are increasing the antimicrobial resistance, we are looking at fires, uncontrolled fires, and we are converting our lands into infrastructure. So this is what, not that this COVID was something which cannot be controlled or cannot be managed, but we need to take steps now. 19, we were caught off guard, I agree. But now in 2021, 22, what is the guarantee that there will not be another pandemic? And you know how variants are working. Somewhere it is Omicron, somewhere it is something else. So we need to look at nature. This is the nature's call or a wake up call that we need to be more responsive. We need to be more careful in the way nature operates. And that is where you can see the biodiversity loss is now being rated as the top 5 threats. Few years back, when biodiversity scientists, when scientists like you and me were talking about conservation, nobody was believing us. Everybody said that conservation is a luxury, which we cannot afford. We have human needs to fulfill. But this is what is the projection, this is what is the evidence that top 5 threats for humanity are biodiversity loss and the infrastructure, the energy, the extractive industry, the mining that we do. I am not saying that we need to stop everything. I cannot do that. I cannot say that. But we need to look at the balance between conservation and development. We need to ensure that our development ambitions are fully backed up by conservation imperatives. So unless we do that, we will not be able to move ahead with our programs of Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas because some of the elements will get affected. So therefore, we need to look at our current pattern of development, which I do not hesitate to say that is apparently unsustainable. There are limits to growth. Nature is not infinite. The resources are not infinite. They may appear to be, but that is not true. So we need to find solutions in which we are able to protect and preserve nature. Interestingly, see the title of the slide. The science is very clear. Many times when we talk to politicians, they say, अरे हमको इसका नहीं पता, हमको ये नहीं पता, हमको वो नहीं पता, हम कैसे decision लेंगे? But that is not fully true. You can see the science and the scientific evidence is there, and we cannot continue to destroy nature. There is a biodiversity collapse, there is a sixth mass extinction, there is a financial risk. I have already said that how SDGs are getting affected, and we need to address the drivers of change. The real change will come when we look at the drivers, and these drivers are not out of the planet. They are, if I can say so, anthropogenic in origin. You and I are equally responsible for these actions. And therefore, we need to introspect and see what steps we need to take and do that. And therefore, we are now talking of, again, our call for conserving nature, now looking at a new deal for nature and people. See, this is a new term which is being discussed at the global level, that we need a new deal. A new deal means we need to look at our own steps. The earlier business as usual is not working. Our economy and ecology is not protected. And therefore, we need to look at the new deal. I'll very briefly explain what this new deal is. Because this is a fact. Nature is fundamental to humankind. We are totally dependent on actions and stewardship. The leadership has to be provided by humans. The animals and plants are the affected parties. They cannot provide leadership. But you and I have to come to the front to develop this leadership skills and be the stewards of environment. I picked up the slide globally. Every often we hear the fires raging in United States, in Florida, in California. These are warning signs that nature is in the red. We need to look at our water, our soils, our pollinators. The livelihoods is getting destroyed and the climatic patterns are changing. There will be more tsunamis, there will be more floods, there would be stochastic events. And that is where we need to be worried about to take steps on that. Interestingly, half of the global domestic product, the gross domestic product, is dependent on nature. Forestry sector is worth $583 billion. Fisheries are another 150. Pollinators, we understand. So all these things we are now trying to put up an economic tag. See, till few years back, we were not able to say that what will be the loss to nature. Fortunately, our economists, our environmental and ecologists and ecological economists have come together. There is a famous Dasgupta report, The Economics of Biodiversity, produced a year ago, very clearly says that we need to protect nature's capital. If we don't do that, then things are going to change, things are going to get affected over there. So, agriculture is at the heart of food production. To the point of repetition to this august esteemed audience, we need to look at soil and water conservation techniques. Yes, we want to have doubling of crops and doubling of everything, but at the same time, healthier soils are needed. Unless our topsoils get protected, unless we prevent erosion, unless we develop and implement heterogeneous crop approaches, and we'll get into local and sustainable production, things are not going to happen in the way we like it to happen. I already made a point that we need to protect nature so that we get clean water. How long can we survive on mineral water bottles and artificial sources? Even now we are saying that even RO water is not good. So we need to be doubly careful on what we are doing to nature, what we are doing to fresh water. This is a very interesting slide. What happens when you conserve or protect nature? Very important for the politician, it leads to job creation. That is where the politician's interest is. If we tell the politician that by protecting nature, it can create jobs. So there are examples that global forestry is employing so many million people. We are also talking of ecosystem services. These services, whether these are of pollination, carbon sequestration, or whatever is doing. But the third circle is very important. For every dollar invested in nature, there is a likely return of $9. See, this kind of a return is nowhere possible. We may invest in gold, we may invest in buying dollars, but this return you will never get. So these are some of the new facts which are coming. Today we talk of evidence-based decision making, evidence-based policy formulation. And this simple slide can convince, I am very confident, our politician and our decision maker, that if you protect in nature, your economic growth is ensured. Your jobs are secured, you can create more jobs market, you can protect the ecosystem services, you can convert them into monetary value. And for every dollar that this country or the world will spend, we will get a return of $9. So what I'm making a plea? I'm making a plea that nature has to be at the heart of our economic model. No development, no vikas that we talk of can happen if we do not care about our nature or our prakriti. That is what is the message and the bottom line, that prakriti has to be at the center of every model of development, every model of economics. So therefore, we need to find a path that puts nature, climate, and people. Right now, they are pitted against each other. Nature versus climate, climate versus nature, climate versus people, people versus climate. We need to understand that we need to live within the planetary boundaries. Scientists have given this concept that we must live within the planetary boundaries. We must look at a path which takes care of nature, climate, and people at the same thing. It is not that when we talk of climate, it is only the climate convention which needs to deal with it. When we talk of biodiversity, it is the biodiversity convention which needs to deal. And when we talk of land, it is land degradation. This is a fallacy. This is something which the world is now increasingly realizing. Actions are still to come, that we need to look at a complete and a holistic view which is there. And unless we do that, we will not be able to move ahead on that. So finally, I want to say these are the scenarios for resource conservation. You can see this dark green line. If the business as usual continues, if you and I and all our policy and decision makers do not take any step, then loss of nature is there. But we can change the trajectory of this curve. See this light green line on the top. These changes are possible, but these changes are possible when we take steps. And what are these steps? These steps are steps for restoration, for green infrastructure, investment in natural capital, bringing in innovations in agriculture, also reducing our consumptions. See, our consumption levels are very high. We may say that they are lower than United States or the developing north or the developed north, but the fact is that these are very high. Nature cannot sustain these consumption levels. We need to look at our entire gamut of subsidies. I do understand there is a role for subsidies, there is a need for agriculture subsidies, but here what I'm talking of are what are called as perverse subsidies, subsidies that harm nature. That is where we need to look at. World is saying eliminate subsidy. India is very strongly arguing at the global level that we cannot use the word eliminate. We can reform them. We can repurpose them. And that is what the stand as we go in the climate and biodiversity negotiations. We are saying that these are necessities. We need to look at better governance model. We need to look at better regulation. So there is a hope, there is a possibility, and I'm very sure if you and I and our colleagues continue to work, we can change the trajectory of this curve. We can bend this curve, as people are saying, by taking steps which are required here. So ultimately, what is our goal? We are already into 2022. We now need to look at how can we be nature positive by 2030. So what you see in this graphic, there are goals. So we know what we want to achieve. We need to protect, we need to restore, we need to safeguard, and we need to reduce the consumption and other levels by half. On your left is the problems. So it's not just wishful thinking. We have now gone into problems, that what is the problem analysis. So, and now our scientists and colleagues have said that these are the solutions. So we now know the goals, we now know the problems, we now know the solutions. What is that we are waiting for? We need to have a larger engagement of people. And that is what these lecture series, which ICAR has so carefully planned. I was very impressed to see the kind of people who have come and lectured much before me and much better than me. But these are some of the things which we need to do, take a resolve, then only we can get a new deal for people and planet. Finally, what I say, we have dramatically reconfigured the fabric of life. The world is definitely more interconnected, but the world is also unequal. The gap between have and have nots, the gap between the developed north and the developing south is increasing. So therefore, we need to take a resolve that we must not further deteriorate nature and planet. We must try to do and take steps to reduce this. And then only we can think of that we have a better future. We will have a kind of a nature which everybody can take pride of. And I'm sure my colleagues will agree that we need to invest more in nature, politically, socially, economically, and by mindset. So I will stop here. And if there are some comments and questions, I would be very willing to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mathur. Excellent talk and excellent facts you have projected. I think they are very disturbing. We have to just take care of the nature, our Mother Earth. And we have to take the message that the nature, climate, and people have to be in this synergy. We cannot afford that any kind of imbalance is there. We have to take care of the soil and water conservation. We have to take care of many things related to the nature. And especially for the agriculture, the ICAR takes full care that the ecosystem is not disturbed, and that's what the new varieties, the new technologies are being developed, taking care of all the use of all kind of technologies. Especially now you see the lot of use of IoTs, the precision agriculture, so that we have all kind of resource optimization and every kind of thing we do. Now, Dr. Mathur Sahab, we have a few questions. I can just tell you, there is a question by Dr. Sunil Archak. What about the self-healing capacity of the nature? Have we destroyed that too? Dr. Sunil Archak is working at NBPJR as a principal scientist.
No, thank you very much for pointing that out. I wish we would have not destroyed the self-healing, regenerative capacity of the earth. But there are indications that we are doing that, adding chemicals, adding pesticides, adding things which should not be there. So yes, nature can heal. Nature can take care of itself. You remember when we have this big abhiyan of cleaning the Ganga, and everybody says that the water and the Ganges water has a self-regenerative capacity. But our scientific studies at WI were clearly pointing that that capacity is getting compromised. It is getting impaired, not that it has disappeared. So this is what your point is very valid. If we take care of nature, nature will take care of you. And if you recall the logo of my own ministry, it says that nature protects if she is protected. See, these 5 words, they sum up everything, the discourse of entire thing that we are having today. But are we doing it? That is my question. We need to introspect that what is the harm, what is the danger, what is the loss we ourselves. And therefore, every report, whether it is IPCC or IPBIS, is pointing out that it is the anthropogenic reasons or factors which are responsible for destroying or affecting nature.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur Sahab. Madam Salini Bhutani, she is putting a question.
Yes, please.
2 questions. And she says that since this talk has 2 dimensions, the global, given the worldwide biodiversity crisis, how should India deal with CBD non-parties such as USA, especially with the new global biodiversity framework on the horizon? And the national is any reflections on the Biodiversity Amendment Bill 2021 and its relevance for a new biodiversity governance? Very relevant questions.
Yeah, 2 very important questions. Everybody is very unhappy all these years of US not being party to the convention. We can only say that at the international level, we are trying our best to persuade that. I should not say, but will say that small changes are visible. Look at the attitude of Trump administration and look at the way in which the new Biden administration is dealing with climate issues. So there is hope. There is hope. The hope needs to be translated into action. But I say that while it will be good for US to sign it, but even if they don't sign, there are many steps which they can take to ensure that climate and emissions which are causing the loss are contained, and a unified way is taken up. And what the South is asking, technology, access to capacity, at least that can be provided. On the second question of amendment, well, you are aware that the government has brought in amendment last December. It is being discussed in the parliament. There are many things which the act came into being in 2002. Now we are into 2022. Many things have changed. Many things have changed. The science itself has changed. If I can give you one example, 20 years back when we said conventional breeding, it had a different connotation. Today, even our farmer is also applying certain methods to improve that. So I would say in a few months' time, we should be able to see that what these implications are going to be. We need to look at a hopeful future, and we need to keep our hope alive. I would say that we will have a better governance model. We should be able to respond to whatever challenges we are saying at the global level. These have to be mashed up at the national level.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. There is another question. What could be the possible mechanism to keep account of gains and losses in natural assets along with annual economic measures and the GDP of a nation? This is a question by Dr. Anuradha Agarwal.
So, Dr. Agarwal, see, things have changed in the last 5 years, if I can say so. Look at the current work of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, which has been tasked in monitoring the progress of India as far as the 17 SDGs are concerned. Look at the new reports which are coming in. Look at the way that the UNI biological scientists are now trying to make an effort with economists. And I mentioned to you the report, the famous report of Das Gupta, who is of course of Indian origin but studied in England, has come up with that the nature's capital is what we need to ensure. If this message is put across everyone, and if this message is implemented, then we will not run after produced capital. We need to look at two things. We need to look at the natural capital and we need to look at the social capital. And that is where my scientific colleagues know that we are now talking of a new socio-ecological framework. This is the framework which is being talked about because it talks about biodiversity, it talks about ecosystem services, it talks about landscapes, it talks about people. So we need to also change ourselves and to change from our silo approaches to our larger approaches. As we say, to quote the Prime Minister, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, then only we will think of having an Atmanirbhar Bharat. Otherwise, all these will remain as a pipe dream.
True. That is true, sir. Now, may I request Dr. Bharucha. Dr. Bharucha, you know, he's a nature lover, and by profession, he is a medical doctor. He is my mentor. I had the opportunity to work with him in a number of committees in the National Biodiversity Authority, and he is well known. I think he's connected with the Salim Ali also, his family, and he looks like Salim Ali. So, Dr. Bharucha, yes, you have any point to make?
Thank you, Agarwal sir. Great to see you this morning. And of course, we will be wonderful to see you on this stage here. I have 2 points really, which have always worried me. And with you for everything that you have said today. We have had long communications about this. How are we going to convince our policymakers? That's so very crucial. And the second is, have we sufficiently put this into formal educational processes at all levels, from school, college, university? These are the two things I think which will, where we'll get a larger number of people with us. And somehow we have not really been able to do that. At least my generation has failed. Your generation has been a bit better, I think, but it was my generation that failed to do this. And that's where the ill began. Can you help us with this?
Sir, as far as the politician is concerned, there is no magical solution, but we keep trying. You have spent all your years, I'm not saying 80 or 85, but all your years you have spent, and I have done mine too, and everybody in this audience has done. The only thing is we need two things. We need to have evidence. See, that was my learning for 30 years that I spent in WII, that scientific evidence is very critical. Our science has to be very strong when we talk of effects or impacts or anything. So if the science is strong, then you can communicate better. So two things, our scientists, agriculture, forestry, biodiversity, they should produce hard evidence, and people like you and me on that evidence and try to communicate as often as possible. Your other point is also very valid. What are we doing to the children? What are we doing to the youth? And I must say that very recent, it's too early to judge, but the new national education policy calls for a change. It is talking of many things. I will say one interesting thing, at least for myself, when I was in class 9, I was making projects, and for making my project, I was relying on my mother and my sister. That prepare something so that I can submit in my botany class, in my zoology class. Today, what the new policy is saying, take these children out. Take them to garden, urban, rural, wherever you are. Make them see things. Make them identify 10 plants, 20 animal species. And Dr. Barucha, I am confident that slowly and slowly, as we move along in this direction, we will have a new generation of people who will then come much better empowered than what at least I was 30, 40 years back. So I am very optimistic, and I'm very hopeful that you and I need to be the torchbearers of providing that opportunity. You are aware that how in NBA and WII we are running an internship program. Any young student who has a degree, no experience, can come and join. Work for a year. See for himself or herself what nature has to offer. Then these people will be our champions. That is the hope I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bharusha, and thanks, Dr. Mathur, for responding to this important question. I'll take one more question, and then I'll ask Dr. Gautam to give his remarks. The question is by Dr. Parimalan, who is working at NBPGR, National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, that how the Russia-Ukraine conflict has the impact on the biodiversity. Is there any assessment so that it becomes a lesson for all others across the world?
Sir, in the two debates that I have attended in Geneva very recently, the discussion was not so much on its impact. It was dominated by politics, whether Russia should be allowed to speak or whether Ukraine will be allowed to speak. So unfortunately, at the global level, you know how geopolitics work. There will be definitely impacts on the ground, which are all for us to see. These are very, very important economic resources in Russia and in Ukraine and so on. I must tell you some very interesting thing. 2 days back, I went to take a yellow fever shot. I'm going to Nairobi tomorrow. So I asked, they said that all the yellow fever vaccine comes from Russia. And there has been no supply for the last 3 to 4 months ever since this war broke out. So these are economic effects are being felt first, then will come ecology, then will come biodiversity and agriculture and so on and so forth. So these effects, anything which happens at the global level will affect, but it is difficult for me at this point to say what the impacts on conservation or biodiversity would be.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. Now, friends, as you know, Dr. P.L. Gautam, he has worked as the chairman of this National Biodiversity Authority. And he is the only man who has also served the another authority, that is Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Authority. So only man who has served both the authorities, and both deal with the biodiversity or agrobiodiversity in a different perspective. So we will request Dr. Gautam, sir, please give your final remarks. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Agrawal, for
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है सर आपका कनेक्शन सर लगता है पुअर है डॉक्टर माथुर आपको आवाज सुनाई दे रही है इनकी
नहीं सर आपकी सुनाई दे रही है इनकी नहीं दे रही
हाँ यस सर आप हाँ जी सर अब बिना वीडियो के बोलिए आप सर
Okay. Well, it was wonderful to hear Dr. Mathur on this very important topic. He has given a very good story about how far we have disturbed the biodiversity and the nature. And he has alarmed about the catastrophic effects which are going to be faced by all of us. He has very nicely summarized the impacts which we are feeling by the loss of biodiversity or loss of nature, and which is affecting our food production, the water quality, and also has some impact upon the genetic diseases. He has very nicely elaborated that the new dimensions of biodiversity relating to the economic development and how to really balance these two. Now, he has indicated that protecting nature can be seen as a sink for creating jobs, a very important reservoir for providing ecosystem services, and also adding to the net GDP of ours. Now, nature, when we mix it with the economic models, and now we say that nature plus developments should be encouraged by 2030. This is a very important challenge. First is that how to address the problems which he has very nicely elaborated. What are the goals to be set for that? And then what benefits we are going to get out of that. He has tried to make a good summary out of that presentation. Friends, we must remember that in natural resources, especially the biodiversity, the whole global community is interdependent. So we have to interconnect ourselves for sharing the biodiversity. And that is why the Convention on Biological Diversity was adopted, and which has three very important pillars: conservation and sustainable conservation and sustainable development, and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of use of biodiversity. Now, this is how the CBD as international treaty was adopted, and it has a lot to do relating to our activities. India was one of the first countries to enact the biodiversity legislation, imbibing the three important pillars of conventional biological diversity. much progress has been made in implementing it. There are, as Dr. Mathur mentioned, we enacted the legislation in 2002, and we are now in 2022. And there are a lot of changes, a lot of things have changed. And that is why the action regarding some amendment in the Act is under the consideration of the Parliament. Taking the whole presentation which Dr. Mathur made, he had alarmed all of us to be very careful about our activities so that the environment is least affected. Now, this requires a lot of capacity building and awareness generation. The question raised was that how far we have been able to generate awareness amongst the common people. Not much. It's a huge task, and I think this is where the different agencies, academic institutions have to come forward and see that our next generation is made sensitized and made responsible along with the present generation to take care of the conservation of the environment and more particularly biodiversity. Well, his lecture was well clear and nicely delivered in very simple mode of delivery. And I really enjoyed his presentation. And I hope all the participants who have joined this event have benefited a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mathur, and thank you, Dr. Agarwal, for making me to make.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for nicely summarizing and giving your comments. And they are very useful comments which you have given in your final remarks. We have to take care really of our environment and not to do any practice which affects or at the cost of the environment. And Dr. Mathur has given a very clear message, and it's a very useful information that investment of $1 can give you a return of $9. So you cannot get ninefold return, and that too at the cost of our health, that too cost of our sustainability, for which we talk always. Anything we talk for sustainability, whether it's agriculture, ecosystem, or our growth, everything has to be sustainable. And for that, there cannot be any better investment than in the ecosystem or in the environment. So thank you, Dr. Mathur Sahab, for giving a very clear message. And we can take a pledge that we will not do anything which directly, indirectly affects our environment. And we have to also just make our consistent efforts so that directly or indirectly we can contribute for the conservation and preservation of our environment. Maybe small steps we can take, but let us take some steps so that we can in true sense say that we have been benefited by this great lecture. So thank you, Dr. Mathur, for enlightening us, and thanks to everybody for joining this. Namaskar, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Namaskar.